Hey guys, tonight we're going all the way back to the year 536. And no, it's not just a random number I plucked from the dustbin of history. It's widely considered the worst year to be alive. Like ever. Not in a I drop my smoothie and miss my bus kind of way. More like the sun disappears, crops fail, civilizations collapse, and your cousin turns into a doomsday prophet kind of way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to comment your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're jolted awake. Something's wrong. The light filtering through your window isn't morning. It's gray, thin, and lifeless, like the world is being lit through dirty snow. You rub your eyes, expecting the sun to burn a little brighter any moment now, but no. It stays this way. Dim, cold, unnerving. You trudge outside. The sky overhead is a strange hue, almost metallic. You can't quite tell if it's dawn or dusk. It all just blurs into a pale, smoky wash. People whisper. Birds seem quieter. Even the dogs bark less. It's not just your village, or even your corner of the empire. This is happening everywhere. From the green hills of Ireland to the crowded streets of Constantinople, the sun has become a ghost of itself. Historians still argue whether the light was dimmed by volcanic ash or cosmic dust from a comet strike. But one thing's for sure, you and everyone you know are walking under a sky that feels broken. The year is 536, and the earth has just been plunged into darkness. Imagine living in a time where you depend on sunlight to know when to pray, when to plant, when to cook, when to hide. Now imagine that light vanishing. Not for an hour, not for a day, but for over a year. That's what people faced in the 6th century. Roman historian Procopius, who was not exactly the ancient version of a clickbait blogger, wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon. Can you picture that? You stare up at the sun, and it's there, but it doesn't warm you. It doesn't dazzle you. It just hovers, cold and defeated. And the cold, that's what really hits next. You shiver more than usual, and it's not just your imagination. Temperatures drop across the northern hemisphere. Summer doesn't come. It's June, and you're still wearing that itchy wool cloak you normally save for December. Snow falls in the middle of harvest season. Streams freeze. Your goats bleat miserably and won't graze. The world's clock has gone haywire. The ash, you learn, though not in those exact words, isn't local. Something enormous has erupted far, far away. Somewhere to the north, perhaps. Or maybe west. Or is it east? People only have rumors, and the rumor mill in the 6th century is about as accurate as a three-legged compass. Still, someone says they heard from a merchant who spoke to a sailor who saw a mountain explode. Another swears that dragons are fighting in the heavens. The only clear thing is that something up there, way up there, has gone terribly wrong. And then there's the silence. It's hard to explain how quiet the world becomes. Without birdsong, without laughter, without bustling markets full of clanging pots and children's shrieks, there's just space. You can hear your own footsteps echo down streets that should be full. Even the church bells seem reluctant to ring, as if sound itself is shivering. But of course, people don't just sit in the quiet. They begin to talk. Too much, perhaps. The local bishop gives sermons about divine wrath. Your neighbor insists it's the end times. A wandering monk starts yelling about Revelation and carrying a severed goat leg as proof. You're skeptical until the village elder, who hasn't spoken in months, whispers, "I remember the sun. This is not it." And he's right. The sun you knew is gone. It gets worse. Crops begin to fail. Not just the picky plants, but the reliable ones. Barley refuses to ripen. Wheat wilts into mush. Turnips turn bitter. You dig for roots in forests and gnaw on tree bark just to quiet your stomach. Hunger becomes a companion. You name it. Joke with it. It never leaves. In cities, things are even grimmer. People crowd around shrines and relics, hoping for a miracle. But miracles are in short supply. So are clean water and bread. And let's just say sanitation is not thriving in the 6th century. You learn to walk past the sick without looking. You learn that sometimes silence from the next room means you're the only one left. Oh, and fun fact. Some folks think this strange, sunless period wasn't caused by just one volcano. Nope. Some modern researchers believe there may have been multiple massive eruptions, one after another, possibly in Iceland, El Salvador, or even Alaska. Historians still argue whether these were separate blasts or all part of one mega eruption complex that messed up the global climate like a chain reaction sneeze. And yes, let's acknowledge the quirky tidbit of the night. One ancient source claimed that the sun had turned blue. Blue. Imagine stepping outside and seeing a dim, pastel sun just hanging there like a dying LED bulb. Not sure whether that's poetic exaggeration or legit optics from volcanic particulates, but either way, yikes. It's not just the sun either. The moon loses its glow. Stars flicker strangely. For ancient peoples, whose entire calendar and belief systems hinge on the sky, this isn't just unsettling, it's cosmic betrayal. You might be wondering, did anyone try to fix it? Well, sure. Kind of. Rituals spike across the world. Some regions sacrifice animals, others humans. In a few places, people fling valuables into lakes to appease whatever spirits are clearly not happy. It's spiritual panic at an industrial scale. And then, slowly, the panic becomes normal. The sky stays weird. Food remains scarce. But people begin to adjust. You learn to eat moss. You learn to scavenge. You grow weirdly used to the quiet, used to the gray. And that might be the scariest part. Because as hard as catastrophe hits, it's the long, dragging after that wears people down. Day after day of cold soup, of dead fields, of mass graves quietly dug at night. Not for the drama, but because it's routine now. Your world hasn't just ended. It's redefined itself. And in that quiet, ash-dimmed world, as you lie down to sleep, belly half empty, staring at a ceiling that creaks under frost, you whisper the same thing your grandmother once told you under a blue sky. This too shall pass. But you're not sure you believe it anymore. You're used to the dark now, not in the poetic, metaphorical way. You're not embracing the void or having some sort of spiritual awakening. No, you're literally just used to squinting at everything all the time. Your eyes ache less. You figured out how to angle your shutters to catch the least pathetic rays of sun, and your nose can now detect spoiled grain from 10 paces. These are your survival skills now. Forget sword fighting or hunting wild boars. In 536, your superpowers include mildew detection and emergency route identification. By now, the year has settled into its own twisted rhythm. You've learned to stop expecting normal. Normal packed its bags sometime in late winter and ghosted civilization. What remains is a weird blend of monotony and anxiety. Every morning feels the same, but every evening brings a new rumor, a new disaster, or someone else who didn't make it. And tonight? Tonight brings smoke. You smell it before you see it. Something burnt, unnatural, acrid. You rush up the hill, heart pounding, and there it is, a neighboring village, half in flames, half abandoned. No sign of raiders. No sign of a lightning strike. Just houses burning like they gave up. You later hear it was deliberate. The villagers set fire to their own homes and left. Better ashes than the slow rot. Better smoke than starvation. You don't talk about it out loud, but it lingers in your mind. How even fire has become a kind of mercy. Elsewhere in the world, things are unraveling in new and creative ways. In Scandinavia, entire regions begin to depopulate. Archaeologists find layers of ash and silence. Abandoned farms, buried tools, settlements where people just stopped. Historians still argue whether this mass disappearance was due solely to the cold, or whether social collapse played a part too. Either way, it's spooky. In China, it's worse. The Northern Wei dynasty is already struggling under political fragmentation and drought. Now the cold takes whatever strength remains. There are reports of widespread famine. Crops die, people die, and soon the dynasty itself follows, fragmenting further into chaos. In the highlands of Central America, the Maya begin to feel the stress too. Their cities don't collapse overnight, but you can already see the signs of trouble. Less food, less ceremony, more signs of internal strife. The sun gods, it seems, are on strike. Across the Eastern Roman Empire, Emperor Justinian is throwing money, soldiers, and prayers at the crisis. You hear stories, his engineers trying to import grain from Egypt, his priests performing mass blessings. He even pushes forward with building projects, like the Hagia Sophia, as if sheer ambition could will the world back into shape. It doesn't. You see the same desperate logic play out at home. A farmer digs his fields by moonlight, mumbling to himself, convinced the sun will return if he plants exactly 7 seeds at midnight. Your cousin keeps an old loaf of bread in a wooden box like a relic. He believes it brings luck. You can't argue with him. The bread hasn't molded yet. That's probably a miracle. But not all the changes are so visible. You begin to notice how people walk now. Slower, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning the ground as if looking for some overlooked solution. Conversations are shorter. Laughter's a rare bird. Smiles don't reach the eyes. The weight is collective. Every village, every household, every person is carrying this invisible burden. The knowledge that the world as it was might not return. That's when the real tension creeps in. Not from famine, not from cold, but from faith. Not religious faith, necessarily, though that gets tested too, but faith in continuity. Faith in tomorrow. Because how do you keep going when all signs point to don't bother? And that's where the prophecies start. You've heard whispers of the 3 days of darkness. Someone swears a monk dreamed it. 3 more days, then the world ends. Another claims a woman coughed up a black stone and spoke in tongues. The veil is thinning, she said, before vanishing into the woods. People begin carving symbols onto doors, hanging bones in trees, making offerings of bread crusts and bent coins. You think it's ridiculous until you find yourself burying a bit of salted pork beneath your floorboards, just in case. Because when logic dies, ritual steps in. And speaking of logic dying, here's your quirky tidbit of the night. In parts of Europe, folks start blaming sun-stealing demons. Yes, actual demons. One legend from the far north describes a long-fingered creature named Skoll who's chasing the sun, trying to eat it. In Norse mythology, this creature succeeds during Ragnarok. And right now, let's just say the odds are looking good for Skoll. Meanwhile, scientific thinkers, what few exist, try to explain it differently. A few scribes mention dry fogs and veils in the air. A Persian scholar writes that the sun's light seems sifted through smoke. They don't know about volcanoes, but they're onto something. And modern scientists? They've dug into ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, finding thick layers of volcanic sulfate dated to, 536. 2, maybe 3 separate eruptions over 5 years. Think of it as the Earth sneezing directly into the atmosphere's face. Back in your reality, the dry fog is still there. You can't see it exactly, but you feel it. It sits heavy on the lungs. People cough more. Eyes water. There's a metallic taste in your mouth some mornings, like you've chewed on a dirty coin. But you press on. You fetch water. You boil roots. You mend your clothes. Because surviving isn't dramatic, it's dull. It's chopping firewood and arguing over whose turn it is to check the traps. And just when you think things might plateau, when you've adjusted to the gray world, your neighbor stumbles in with news. A plague has begun. Yes, another crisis. As if famine and darkness weren't enough, people are now collapsing with fevers, sores, and death on their breath. Some say it's punishment for sin. Others blame foreign merchants. A few claim it's the final trumpet. You don't know it yet, but this is the plague of Justinian, the first recorded pandemic of bubonic plague in human history. Within the next few years, it will kill tens of millions, perhaps up to half the population of some regions. Historians still argue whether this plague is directly linked to the volcanic climate disaster, but the timing is too perfect to ignore. The world is down. Now the plague is kicking it. And you just keep boiling your water and counting your blessings. There are still moments of strange beauty, though. One night, the clouds break for a few precious minutes. You and a few neighbors gather outside, faces tilted skyward, watching stars blink into view for the first time in months. Someone starts a cry, not out of sorrow, but relief. Hope even. It doesn't last. The clouds return, but so does something else, endurance. You notice that your body has adjusted to leaner meals. Your skin is tougher. Your mind, though always tired, has stopped expecting comfort. You've adapted, not by choice, but by necessity. And that's the quiet, terrible lesson of 536. You don't survive because you beat the odds. You survive because you get used to losing. But you're still here, still walking under the dim sun, still waiting for the light to come back. You don't mark time by months anymore. Months have betrayed you. They used to mean something. June meant ripe fruit. September meant harvest. December meant candles and warm stew and stories by the fire. Now, June is just another chapter in a book you wish you could burn for heat. Instead, you count time by other things. The number of dead birds in the stream. The week since the last traveler passed through. The day your neighbor's child stopped asking for bread. These become your milestones. Today, your count resets again. A merchant arrives from the east, thin, leather-skinned, hollow-eyed, but alive, and he carries stories. You offer him what little you can, a crust of barley bread and a scrap of wool to wrap his bleeding feet. In return, he gives you tales of collapsing empires. He speaks of Sogdiana, once a bustling crossroads of the Silk Road, now eerily quiet. Of India, where monsoon patterns have become erratic, floods in the dry season, droughts in the wet. Of the Gupta Empire, whose golden age is cracking at the seams, starved by failing crops and fragmenting kingship. He even speaks of Ethiopia, where the kingdom of Aksum, so mighty a generation ago, now reels under trade collapse. Their Red Sea ports go quiet as merchants vanish and harvests wither. The incense stops flowing. The gold slows to a trickle. You ask him about China. He shrugs. Cold, empty, hungry. That's all he says. That's all anyone says these days. You invite him to stay the night. It's not just kindness. It's curiosity. He's the closest thing to a news scroll the world has left. Over a sputtering fire, he tells you how the heavens themselves seem to be protesting. There are reports, multiple from across continents, of eerie celestial phenomena. The moon appears blue, even green. Sunsets, when they happen at all, are blood red, sometimes violet. And the stars? They vanish for weeks at a time, obscured by that endless, stubborn veil. Historians still argue whether these phenomena were merely tricks of light caused by volcanic aerosols or signs of something even stranger, like the Earth's magnetic field fluctuating in ways we don't yet understand. But what matters to you, sitting there in the flickering dark, is how universal the strangeness is. Everyone is suffering, everywhere. There's an odd comfort in that. Well, maybe not comfort, but solidarity, like the whole world is holding its breath together. And then the merchant says something that stops your heart cold. Do you know what year it is? He asks. You hesitate. The calendar broke a long time ago. 536, he says. The year the world ended. You stare at him, not because it sounds dramatic, but because it doesn't. It sounds accurate. He explains that in Constantinople, people are saying this is the apocalypse. Not metaphorically, literally. The end of days. The darkening of the sun, the plague, the famine, it all fits too neatly with the prophecies. Some bishops argue it's a punishment. Others say it's a test. A few claim it's neither, just the turning of an age. You glance at the children huddled in the corner. One is drawing an ash on the floor. Nothing coherent, just spirals and dots. Her eyes are too serious for a 6-year-old. The end of the world? Maybe. But what does that even mean when this is normal now? The merchant leaves in the morning. He thanks you. You wish him luck. You both know you won't see each other again. But his words linger. The year the world ended. It echoes in your ears every time the sky fails to brighten. Every time the fields stay dead. Every time another family packs up and disappears into the forest, looking for something, anything better. And it's not just the weather. You start to notice other changes. The structure of life is warping. Hierarchies loosen. Kings go missing. Tax collectors vanish. In some places, local farmers take over abandoned villas. In others, religious cults crop up, led by men and women claiming divine visions. You hear of one group that's built a tower from animal bones, convinced the higher they climb, the closer they'll be to sunlight. They don't get very far. There's a fringe idea spreading through merchant gossip and panicked priests that this isn't just a crisis, it's a reset, a thinning of humanity, a thinning of history, that the year 536 is a turning point, not just in weather or crops, but in everything. You scoff at first, but then again, your grandfather's stories feel like they belong to another planet now. His world had song festivals, painted walls, markets overflowing with figs. Yours has root soup and sunless days and morning. Still, humans are stubborn. Even in collapse, people build. You see it in the priest who starts carving prayers in a tree bark, in a couple who rescue an abandoned calf and raise it like a child, in the boy who crafts tiny figurines out of hardened mud, placing them in a ring by the stream as if they're holding counsel. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. It's survival. Here's a strange detail for you. There's evidence that during this time, people in Ireland buried hoards of treasure, not for hiding from raiders, but as offerings. Gold, silver, jeweled brooches, all sunk into bogs and buried in hills. Not for future use, but to appease something. Historians still argue whether these were acts of desperation or of hope. Maybe both. Meanwhile, back in Byzantium, Justinian keeps pretending things are fine. The Hagia Sophia rises, astonishing in its scale and ambition. It gleams, even as the city starves and the disease creeps closer. You hear someone call it a candle lit in a flooded house. You wonder if that's bravery or denial. Either way, it's all anyone can do. Keep lighting candles. Keep boiling roots. Keep scratching days into door frames and try to believe they still mean something. And through it all, the darkness holds. You remember warmth only in dreams now. Sunlight is a concept, not a feeling. You talk about it like the old bards talk about dragons, something that might have existed once, but probably didn't. But deep inside, some stubborn part of you refuses to give up entirely. You keep a seed, a single barley seed, hidden in a bit of cloth under your mattress. Useless for food, too small to matter. But it's there, a piece of before, a whisper of what might come after, if after ever arrives. And so you sleep, and wake, and sleep again, waiting for the world to restart. You wake up to birdsong. No, not a chorus, not even a duet. Just one tentative chirp from a scraggly pine tree outside your hut. But it startles you. For months, maybe a year now, the only sounds have been wind, hacking coughs, and the occasional bleating goat. But this little trill is defiant. You sit up slowly, savoring it like the first bite of real bread. You wait for another chirp. You don't get one, but it's enough. The idea that something feathered and foolish might still believe the sky is worth singing to. That's hope, whether you like it or not. Don't get too excited, though. The darkness hasn't lifted. Not really. The sun still looks like it's wearing a threadbare funeral shroud. The frost still clings to the inside of your window, even in what should be summer. But something's changed. Something small. You step outside and sniff the air. Less metallic. Less bitter. You glance at the hills. Still gray. Still dead. But maybe, just maybe, less quiet. And then the messenger comes. Not a royal envoy or horse-mounted herald, mind you. Just a barefoot teenager with soot on his face and twigs in his hair, stumbling in from the woods like he's crawled out of a fable. He's half-starved, but his eyes are on fire. There's light, he says. He doesn't mean it metaphorically. He means actual light. A few miles east, he says, the clouds broke. Briefly. And people saw it. The sun. Not the cold, iron coin it's been all this time, but a true sliver of gold. A flame. You blink. Then you start walking. Others join you. Word spreads like fire finally remembered how to burn. You and your neighbors, bitter, hungry, bent by months of soot and sadness. You follow this wild boy and his half-true rumor like he's Moses parting the gray sea. And sure enough, as you crest the ridge, there it is. Just a shard, a single crack in the sky. But sunlight, honest sunlight, falls through it like honey. It hits the dirt, the trees, your hands. Warmth, not imagined, real. And in that moment, you understand something terrifying and wonderful. You forgot what the sun felt like. You forgot. Your body trembles as if remembering itself. Some people fall to their knees. Others laugh. One man strips off his tunic and shouts, "I knew it. I knew it wasn't gone." You just stand there, blinking into the light, tears cutting clean lines down your ash-smeared face. It only lasts a minute, maybe less. Then the clouds return, thick as grief. But it doesn't matter. You saw it. The sun is still there. Somewhere. And that flicker, brief as it was, triggers a kind of frenzy. People begin planting again. Not just hoarding old stores and boiling bark they plant. With purpose. With shaky, frantic optimism. You dig your little barley seed from under the mattress and press it into the thawing soil like a prayer. Others do the same. Seeds hidden in cupboards, behind altars, in folds of old cloaks. Suddenly they all matter. No one knows if the crops will take. But now there's the chance that they might. And that's enough. Well, almost enough. Because not everyone believes in the comeback. Here's your quirky detail of the night. There's a growing belief, especially in the alpine regions, that the darkness wasn't natural, but the result of sin. Specifically, people being too loud. Yes, there's a monk who writes that the heavens have veiled their light in shame for the clamor of mankind. So entire villages start holding periods of silence. Whole days go by where no one speaks above a whisper. Children are shushed, songs are banned, even church bells are muffled. Imagine how weird your town would look if everyone just hushed. But then again, isn't the whole world weird now? Historians still argue whether the population decline in these years, especially across Europe and Asia, was more due to disease, starvation, or despair. One theory suggests that after the first wave of suffering, people simply gave up. They stopped trying. They let the fields go. They didn't bother to raise children. And that silence you hear, it's not reverence. It's resignation. But you're not resigned. Not today. Today, you begin rebuilding. Not with marble and columns and grand manifestos. With shoestrings and burnt wood and stubbornness. You fix your door. You repair the goat pen. You help your neighbor patch his roof. These aren't repairs, really. They're arguments against extinction. You even smile once, only briefly, and only because your cousin falls into a ditch chasing a chicken. But still, that counts. There's a rhythm now. Wake up, breathe, plant, scavenge, mend, sleep, repeat. It's not joy. It's not even hope exactly, but it's motion. And after everything, motion feels sacred. The priest in town starts preaching again. Only this time, he changes his tune. Less brimstone, more grace. He talks about how winter doesn't last forever. How resurrection always starts in the dirt. You don't believe everything he says, but it's nice to hear someone else pretend to. And slowly, the darkness changes color. Still heavy, still thick, but tinged now with silver, not lead. When the sun breaks through, it stays a little longer. The air warms a little sooner, and you find a dandelion growing in the corner of your ruined garden. You kneel beside it like it's holy. Because in 536 it is. You remember the merchant's words, the year the world ended. But standing here, dirt under your nails, light on your face, you start to wonder. Maybe 536 wasn't the end. Maybe it was the bottom. And what comes next isn't just survival. It's beginning. You never thought you'd be grateful for the color brown. But here you are, staring at the first clumps of moist, healthy soil in over a year like at the chest of gold. After all that ashen dust, all those frozen fields, all those days where you couldn't tell dawn from dusk, just this patch of ordinary earth feels like a miracle. The frost has begun to let go, hesitantly, like a guest who overstayed and now awkwardly gathers its coat, muttering excuses. The snow doesn't vanish in some dramatic flourish. It just thins out, recedes into shrunken shadows, leaves behind glistening puddles and soggy moss. And then, just like that, your sprout appears. A tiny green curl pushing its way up through the cracks, as if to ask, is it safe yet? You cry. Not the loud, racking kind. Just a quiet, chin-trembling mist of tears that comes from the place in you that forgot life could still come back. Because this isn't just a plant. This is proof that the world didn't forget how to breathe. But don't get carried away. That little green curl, it might die tomorrow. Might be nibbled by a mouse, or crushed by a boot, or frozen by a last gasp of winter. Still, you don't pluck it. You guard it like it's royalty. And you're not alone. All across your village, people are watching dirt like it's theater. Neighbors lean over garden beds, whispering to beans. Children carry buckets of water with the solemnity of priests. Someone even writes a song, terrible but catchy, about the brave little turnip. A few towns away, there's a strange new ritual. Farmers form circles around their seedlings at dusk, holding candles and murmuring prayers in Latin, Greek, or whatever scraps of sacred words they remember. It's less about language and more about longing. Historians still argue whether this resurgence of mystical agricultural practices reflects religious devotion or simply desperation disguised as ceremony. You don't care either way, because the plants, well, some of them, are growing. You mark time now by leaves. The barley you planted under your mattress is watchful, has cracked the soil. It shivers weakly, but it's upright. A friend gifts you an onion bulb. You plant it like it's a dowry. Someone else barters for garlic cloves from a traveler. And suddenly, there's the rumor of taste on the horizon. Food. Not just famine caliber bark stews or gritty pottage, actual food. You don't have enough for feasts, of course. No one does. But you can imagine feasts again, and that's something. You catch yourself dreaming about soft cheese, roasted apples, honey on bread. Your stomach laughs at you. Your heart doesn't. There's a new problem, though, wild animals. They're hungry too, and bolder now. Foxes skulk closer to homes. Wolves roam the edges of hamlets in tighter packs. Crows, sharp-eyed and opportunistic, become both menace and metaphor. One lands on your windowsill and stares at you like it's judging your life choices. You shoo it off with a broom and mutter something insulting. Here's a quirky detail. Some villagers start placing carved wooden faces on the edges of their fields, grotesque, bug-eyed, tongue-lolling visages designed to scare off spirits and animals alike. They call them watchers. You carve one too. It's hideous. You name it Gilbert. Gilbert guards your turnip patch. There's still danger everywhere. The plague hasn't completely gone. There are rumors of new fevers in the south, and some towns keep burning corpses just to be safe. One monk claims to have seen a woman coughing up black worms. You try not to think about that at night. Still, things feel less like dying and more like enduring. One day, you hear laughter from the hilltop. That alone is suspicious. You follow the sound and find a group of teenagers sliding down a muddy slope on scraps of bark. Their clothes are soaked, their feet are bare, and they're cackling like they've discovered wine. You watch them for a long time. You remember being that young once. You remember mud not being a threat. And even though your knees ache just looking at them, you smile. Maybe the worst is over. But then come the rains. Oh, the rains. Not gentle spring showers. Not healing, garden-kissing drizzles. These rains are wild. Manic, like the sky drank too much and needs to purge. They slam the earth in sudden, thundering downpours, turning roads into rivers and streams into monsters. Your roof leaks in 3 places. Your goat nearly drowns in its pen. The new barley patch, flattened like a bad haircut. And just when you think you can't take another soggy morning, another squelching boot, another thunderclap that sounds too close, the lightning starts hitting trees. Not in the woods. In town, 2 cottages burn before the fire is tamed by mud and desperation. A dog goes missing. A child is born during a storm and named Tempesta. You hope it's not a bad omen. Historians still argue whether these chaotic weather swings were the aftermath of the volcanic eruption or just part of Earth's natural rebound cycle. Either way, it's exhausting. Like the planet itself is having mood swings. But slowly, so slowly, the rains soften. The winds quiet. The clouds begin to travel, not hover. And one day, the sun comes out and stays. You stare at it like an old friend you assumed was dead. Its warmth on your face feels foreign, not comforting, almost aggressive. You squint, unsure whether to thank it or blame it. Eventually, your skin remembers. Eventually, you begin to sweat again. And that's how you know you're no longer living in a year without summer. You're living in the summer that remembers how to be summer. A confused, patchy, too hot, too wet mess of a season, but a season nonetheless. The world is still shaky. Trade hasn't fully resumed. Governments are brittle. Disease lingers in the corners. But you can smell growth again. The trees regain their bark. Bees hum cautiously. Even Gilbert the grotesque gets a little sunburned. And you're still here. You never thought you'd miss the quiet. But now, with the sun back and the ground alive, your village is loud again. Not the laughter of full bellies or the chorus of spring festivals. Those haven't returned yet. But the clatter of tools, the chatter of neighbors, the occasional goat that sounds like it's arguing with God. It's the sound of survival with momentum. You wake earlier now, not out of fear, but because there's work to do. Real work. Fields to weed, fences to fix, leaks to patch. You can't help but hum while you do it. An old tune from childhood that bubbles up without warning. It feels like finding a long-lost sock. By midsummer, your little barley crop has gone from maybe to miracle. Pale green shoots sway in the breeze like they know something you don't. And though they're still scrawny, still bruised by the bizarre weather, they're there. You run your hand through them, let them tickle your palm. You don't say it out loud, but in your head, you whisper, "Thank you." Across the region, others are whispering too. There are reports, tentative, hushed, but persistent, that other towns are doing the same. In Gaul, some villagers have begun to brew again. Weak beer, sure, but with hops. In the Eastern Empire, olive trees are bearing timid fruit. In Syria, bees are returning. And then someone shows up with something extraordinary. A lemon. A real lemon. You don't even like lemons, but this one's different. A wandering trader offers it in exchange for 2 lengths of wool and an old knife. It smells bright. Like clarity. Like summer. Like an apology from the universe. You cut it carefully, share slices like communion. It stings your mouth. It makes a child cry. But still, no one forgets it. Not everything is rebuilding smoothly, of course. Historians still argue whether the labor shortages of this period were due to plague mortality or widespread displacement. But either way, work is hard. Entire families are gone. Entire villages vanished. And the ones that remain are different. People have lost more than homes. They've lost order. Before, things had rules. King, priest, landlord, peasant. Now, the lines have blurred. You hear about communities where elders have been replaced by younger survivors, where widows now lead councils, where coins are traded alongside charms and prayers. A merchant tells you of a village where the baker is also the blacksmith because, well, no one else is left. In another, children run messages for grain, while adults build walls with borrowed hammers. Roles have bent, twisted, stretched to fit the new shape of the world. And amid all this shifting, there's something even stranger happening. People are talking again. Really talking. Not just survival updates or prayer recitations. Stories. At night, gathered around meager fires or candles stuck in bits of clay, people start telling tales again. Some are old, epics, myths, cautionary fables. But many are new. Stories about the long dark, about ghosts in the ash, about brave turnips and wooden face guardians like your own Gilbert. You listen, spellbound, because in those stories you hear grief, but also grit, humor, even hope. Here's a quirky detail. Somewhere in what's now modern-day Switzerland, survivors begin holding contests where people take turns describing the worst part of the last year. Whoever makes the others groan, the loudest wins a boiled egg. It's called the Doom Game. You kind of wish you'd thought of it first. One man's winning entry. I once tried to eat soap bark stew 3 times. You begin to collect these stories, scribbling bits on scrap cloth, burned parchment, even the inside of your shoe. You don't know why. Maybe for your children, maybe for future travelers, maybe just so you remember you weren't alone. And with these stories comes something even more audacious. Laughter. The first time you hear someone genuinely laugh again, it startles you. You glance around, as if someone's broken a rule. Then you realize, no one's laughing at misfortune. They're laughing with it. A shared joke about moldy bread. A sarcastic imitation of the local monk who tried to exorcise the fog. You even hear someone quip, well, at least now we know what not to do if the sun vanishes again. You chuckle, because somehow, laughing about it all is worse than crying, but also better. And then comes another kind of noise. One you haven't heard in over a year. Hoofbeats. A group of riders enters town. Not invaders or tax collectors, but officials. Imperial, maybe, or regional. Their clothes are mismatched, dusty, stitched and restitched, but they carry seals, scrolls, small coin pouches. The world, it seems, is trying to remember its borders. They ask questions. How many people are left? How many fields are active? Are there stores of grain? Are the roads passable? One of them writes everything down on thin, stiff parchment. You eye his ink-stained hands with envy. Imagine what you could document with tools like that. They offer small tokens of reward, salt, mostly. Some dried figs, a stamp coin with a new face on it. You haven't seen a minted coin in over a year. It feels absurd, like someone handed you a coupon for a world that doesn't exist anymore. Historians still argue whether this wave of local administration was genuine governance or just ambitious scribes trying to prove their usefulness. Either way, it marks a shift. The world isn't just growing things again. It's organizing again. One morning, you wake to find a notice nailed to the town well, a proposed market day. Handwritten, lopsided, but it's real. People will bring goods, eggs, cloth, tools, herbs. Trade openly. You get butterflies just thinking about it. On market day, you wear your cleanest tunic, which is not saying much, and bring your last spool of twine and a pot of barley mush sweetened with the tiniest drop of leftover honey. You hope someone's craving nostalgia. The market isn't much. A few stalls, a stubborn goat that escapes twice, children giggling over a broken spinning top. But it feels almost like before. And maybe, just maybe, the before isn't gone. It's just mutating. By midsummer's end, you've built something strange and unexpected. A new life. Not the old one, patched together. Not the one you imagined in your darkest dreams. But one with habits. With smiles. With sunburns. You still pray. You still plant. You still mourn. But now, when you hear a bird sing, you don't flinch. You sing back. You never thought a single loaf of bread could make you cry. But there it is, warm, uneven, cracked down the middle like a fault line. It's sent blooming through your tiny cottage like incense. You broke your last bit of dried yeast into the dough, muttered a half-joking chant over it. And now it rises like a sleepy miracle. It's not perfect. The crust's too hard, the bottom's scorched, and the inside's a bit damp. But it's bread. Real bread. You tear off a piece, blow gently on the steam, and take a bite. You don't just taste barley and salt. You taste possibility. It's not just you. Food is returning to your world like an old friend who forgot your birthday, but brings cake anyway. The fields are sprouting more consistently. The weeds are less ambitious, and the bugs, the good ones like bees and beetles, have resumed their noisy work. Which means something truly extraordinary is starting to happen again. Trade. It begins in whispers. A traveling tanner arrives with 2 goats and leaves with a basket of wild mushrooms and a tunic missing a sleeve. A woman from the neighboring village passes through with clay, jugs, and gossip. Word spreads. Roads are opening. Not safe exactly, but passable. You begin to notice little signs of connection. Bits of fabric dye to color your region doesn't use. Coins with the faint outline of a distant monarch. A curious child humming a song clearly not from your tongue. Historians still argue whether this brief resurgence of trade in the late 530s was truly an economic revival or simply the natural movement of desperate people toward anything resembling commerce. But you know what it feels like? A pulse. And just like a body waking from coma, the world twitches, stretches, and begins to remember how to move again. You decide to risk it. Your first journey outside the village since the fog. It's not far, just to the next hamlet downriver, but it feels like an odyssey. You pack carefully, a small pouch of roasted grains, a patch of rabbit fur, your lucky rock. Yes, it's a thing now. And your walking stick, newly carved with a protective spiral. You set off at dawn, nervous. The road is strange, familiar in shape but wild in texture. Stones swallowed by weeds, bridges sagging like tired knees, and no signposts. Trees have grown unruly, reclaiming paths like vengeful landlords. But there's life, too. You pass 2 other travelers, both cautious, both quick with their eyes. One offers a nod, the other a soft peace upon you, and you realize that even suspicion has its manners now. By midday, you reach the hamlet. It's smaller than you expected. Fewer houses, fewer people, but more color. Someone has strung blue cloth across the doorways, and a child plays with a wheel of braided grass. You smell lentils and wood smoke. You're greeted with wary curiosity. Questions, always questions. Where are you from? Are you healthy? Did you bring anything to trade? You offer your rabbit fur and some roasted grain in exchange for 2 eggs and a sliver of cheese. The woman you trade with doesn't smile, but she gives you an extra pinch of salt. That's as good as a hug. And then someone brings out music. A flute, simple and cracked, but capable of song. The notes waver in the air like moths. A boy claps along. Someone hums. And for a few minutes you all just exist together. Not as survivors. Not as strangers. Just as humans with ears and rhythm. You stay the night, curled under a spare blanket that smells faintly of lavender and ash. You dream of lemon trees and sunlit roads. In the morning, you return home. Different, because you now know what you suspected. Life is bigger than your village again. And so, something inside you stirs. Not hunger, not fear, curiosity. What else is out there? Who else is rebuilding? What secrets lie in abandoned temples, hollowed cities, quiet coastlines? You're not the only one thinking it. All over the continent, people like you are venturing farther. Some are scavengers, looking for scraps of the old world. Others are messengers, bearing news of births and deaths. A few are just wanderers, drawn by dreams or guilt or sheer restlessness. And they carry stories. A boy in sandals tells of a monastery on a mountain where monks are inventing new alphabets. A tanner swears he saw lights dancing over a crater where a village once stood. A woman with ash-blonde hair claims to have crossed a frozen lake on foot and found an entire abandoned castle filled with books untouched by mold. Historians still argue whether these post-apocalyptic myths were exaggerated folklore or real observations passed along the trade routes. But you believe most of them, because hope always sounds like a fairy tale at first. And speaking of fairy tales, people are telling new ones. They're not just retelling the old epics or the parables from the Bible anymore. No, now there are tales of ash eaters, strange spirits who survive by drinking fog, of the sun stealer, a bird so massive it swallowed the sky, of the girl who grew wheat in her hair, who fed her village with a single braid. You love these stories. They're weird. They're raw. They're laced with humor and sorrow and occasional potatoes. But most of all, they feel true. Not literally, of course, but emotionally. They tell the truth of what it was like to live through 536 and what it means to live after it. In your own home, you begin crafting your version. Your little sister draws the ash eaters as wiggly ghosts with teeth. Your uncle insists the sun stealer is based on real climate data, whatever that means. You all laugh, and for the first time in ages, you host a gathering. Just a small one. A few neighbors, some dried fruit, a pot of weak beer. You tell your new story by firelight, using silly voices and dramatic pauses. There's laughter. There are gasps. Someone throws a walnut at you for skipping a character's name. And afterward, as the embers crackle and the room fades into sleepy silence, you feel something precious settle around you. Community. It's not what it used to be, but it's real. The seasons turn now like pages in a well-loved book. You're not holding your breath anymore every time the sun disappears behind a cloud. You still glance up, sure. Old habits die hard, but your heart no longer drops like a rock every time the sky darkens. Because unlike that endless gray stretch in 536, it comes back. And you've changed with it. Your hands are calloused in new places. Your dreams no longer throb with dread, but flicker with peculiar hope. You've aged. Who hasn't? But something young has returned too. Curiosity, maybe. Or foolishness. Or courage. Let's go with all three. You stand in your little garden, watching the beans creep like thieves up a crooked trellis. The sun is out, and the wind smells like lavender and old wood. Somewhere nearby, someone is laughing, full-bellied, unguarded. You don't even know who it is. But you smile. Then you hear it. Hoofbeats again. Only this time, they're not alone. Voices. Dozens. The shuffle of feet. Creaking carts. A procession is moving along the road just beyond your field, and you catch a glimpse between the hedges. People. So many people, all walking in the same direction. A strange parade of rags, cloaks, polished boots, and bare feet. Some carry baskets. Others push wheelbarrows. A few lead goats, or kids, or creaky wagons filled with everything they own. You wave one down. A young woman with dirt under her fingernails and a painted stone tied around her neck stops to chat. Her voice is raspy but strong. "We're going east," she says, "to the Salt Hills." You blink. Salt Hills? You've heard the name, but only in stories. A place where the earth weeps crystals and water bubbles up in metallic pools. Half myth, half memory. She grins. They say there's a settlement there now. Real buildings. A market. Even a scribe's hall. We're going to help build more. Historians still debate whether these salt colonies were government-led attempts at resource control or spontaneous survivor cooperatives. Either way, they start popping up in records from multiple regions. And they attract people like light attracts moths, or hope attracts the desperate. You consider joining them, but your roots feel heavier than your feet. Instead, you ask the girl if she'll return one day and tell you what it's like. She nods, pats your arm, and disappears down the road with the others. That evening, you sit by your little fire and write in your journal. Not parchment or ink, but a slab of bark rubbed smooth with ash. Letters scratched in with the tip of an old nail. It's clumsy, uneven, but legible. You write, "Today, I saw the world walking forward." You hang the bark above your hearth. It creaks with the heat, but it stays. In the weeks that follow, more travelers come. Some stay for a night, others for a season. A few settle entirely, weaving into your village like new threads in an old cloth. And with them come strange new things. A lump of red clay that sings when rubbed. A coin stamped with a goat's head instead of an emperor. A wooden carving shaped like a lion with a fish's tail. Some of these things are trade goods. Some are totems. Some are just odd. But each one carries a story, and people want to tell them. You find yourself listening more than speaking these days. Around fires by wells, on dew-slick stones, you hear tales of rebirth and reinvention. One man speaks of a ruined library where the books are now used as bricks, insulating walls with wisdom. Another tells of a convent where the nuns now teach farming as penance and scripture. A child describes a dog that led an entire family out of a collapsing village, only to vanish the next day. You laugh. You cry. You record every detail you can. even fringe stuff, especially the fringe stuff, like the man who claims he met a woman made entirely of fog, or the trader who swears the black sea briefly turned green and spat out glowing fish, or the shepherd who found an apple tree blooming with silver leaves. Historians, bless their analytical hearts, still argue whether these tales were psychological coping mechanisms, exaggerations, or coded messages. You've learned to keep your skepticism soft and your imagination wide. Because sometimes survival requires believing in impossible things. And speaking of impossible, there's talk of rebuilding cities. Not just hamlets or fortified farms, actual cities. In the Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople is still trembling, battered by plague, but alive. In parts of Persia, noble estates are becoming administrative hubs. Even in faraway places like Aksum and parts of India, rulers are trying to stitch their fragmented territories back together. One traveling monk claims to have seen Theodora herself. Yes, that Theodora, wife of Justinian, standing on palace steps with her crown askew, commanding workers to relay mosaics by hand. You roll your eyes, but still savor the image. Because if that's true, then maybe, just maybe, the worst truly is behind you. And yet, not all scars fade. There are still days when the wind shifts and you smell the ash of a fire that isn't there. Still nights when the moon looks too pale, too far away. Still moments when you hesitate to hope too hard. After all, you remember the year without light. You remember the stillness, the rot, the way your breath once fogged up your hope like a cracked window in winter. But now, there's music again. Not flutes or lutes, though yes, those too, but rhythm. Drum beats, stomping feet, clapping hands. Someone somewhere started a dance, and it's traveling like wildfire. A simple step-step spin, easy to learn, impossible to forget. Children teach it to strangers. Farmers do it while harvesting. Even elders, grumbling, give in to the beat. You learn at one twilight, barefoot in your garden, as neighbors clap along. You laugh until your ribs ache. And in that moment, dizzy, joyful, entirely present, you realize something profound. You didn't survive the year of darkness just to survive. You survived to remember, yes, but also to live. The seasons continue their slow march, and with them, you feel a shift deeper than the changing weather, an awakening in your very bones. You're no longer just a survivor. You're a witness to a world quietly reshaping itself after nearly drowning in shadows. The whispered rumors you've heard from traveling traders and returning wanderers are beginning to crystallize into something more tangible. Institutions rebuilding. You might scoff at the word institution. It probably conjures images of stuffy officials in shining armor or priests droning Latin prayers from vaulted cathedrals. But in 540-something, institutions look different. They're scrappy, fragile, and often run on hope, faith, or sheer stubbornness. In your village, for example, the elders have gathered to re-establish a council. Not the grand kingship or imperial bureaucracy of old, but a simple group entrusted with settling disputes, organizing repairs, and distributing food fairly. It's a patchwork government, held together by trust and a shared fear of returning to chaos. But beyond your village, new and surprising things are happening. Monasteries, those bastions of faith and learning, are quietly reawakening. You hear from a friar passing through that some have reopened their scriptoriums, painstakingly copying old manuscripts by candlelight, preserving knowledge on fragile parchment that might otherwise vanish forever. These monks are, in a way, the librarians of the apocalypse, defiant custodians of memory. Then there's the fascinating rise of localized law codes, attempts by regional leaders to establish order where empires once ruled. These aren't elegant, uniform laws, but often brutal and peculiar decrees, like one decree forbidding the theft of chickens under penalty of public shaming, or another mandating that all merchants carry a sealed letter certifying their goods' origins, a crude form of early consumer protection. Historians still debate whether these laws were effective tools of governance or mere symbols trying to mimic the stability of past regimes. Either way, they reveal how people desperately sought to create new social contracts from the rubble. Meanwhile, your village receives rare visitors. Ambassadors from distant realms bearing news of the Byzantine Empire's stubborn hold on Constantinople and of the Sasanian Persians still fighting to reclaim lost territories. These emissaries bring exotic goods, stories of battles won and lost, and rumors of plague outbreaks far to the east. You listen, entranced, to the tales of massive armies still marching, of generals using flaming war elephants, of couriers racing across deserts with secret messages. The world may be fractured, but it's far from static. At night, you lie awake thinking about how this slow reweaving of society mirrors the rebuilding of your own life. The cracks in your hearth, the worn wood of your doorframe, the patches on your clothes, all reminders that healing is a process, not a moment. Yet even as institutions and armies creep back into the picture, the scars of 536 still bleed in quieter ways. Food shortages are not gone. They merely hide beneath layers of desperation and ingenuity. Plague outbreaks linger like ghosts, striking down the strong and the weak alike without warning. And the climate? You still catch glimpses of its moody temperament. Some years bring terrible droughts, others floods that wash away precious soil. But humans, you realize, have an uncanny talent for stubbornness. They adapt. They innovate. You've heard about new farming techniques emerging, rotating crops, creating raised beds to avoid floods, even simple irrigation systems dug by hand. One story, told by a traveling engineer who calls himself a water whisperer, fascinates you. He claims to have found a way to divert a small stream into dry fields using wooden channels sealed with clay. This idea is still experimental, maybe even fanciful, but if it works, it could change the game for food security. You dream of testing it in your own garden. You also notice the subtle return of art and music beyond your doorstep. Potters shape new vessels, sometimes with elaborate patterns that tell stories of the lost years. Weavers experiment with colors and textures that were forgotten during the dark times. Musicians compose new melodies that blend old folk tunes with rhythms inspired by faraway lands. Your village's storyteller, a wiry old man with a voice like gravel, has begun performing epic poems again, using words that invoke the sun, rain, and stars as characters rather than just background. You remember how, back when the fog was thickest, silence swallowed song. Now, the opposite is true, and yet, through all this budding hope and renewal, a whisper of caution lingers. Some villagers still distrust outsiders. Old wounds don't heal quickly, and the memory of betrayal or loss makes trust a precious, guarded thing. You watch neighbors eyeing new arrivals suspiciously, sometimes openly arguing over trade terms or shared water sources. You yourself find it hard not to clutch your belongings tighter when unfamiliar faces appear. It's a world still fragile, still dangerously close to unraveling. But here's the thing. Even in the darkest days, life finds a way. The cicadas buzz again in the hedgerows. The river's murmur grows louder with spring melt. The smoke from 100 hearths twines upward into the sky like a soft promise. And you, dear listener, are part of that promise. Because you've chosen to stay awake, to notice the small signs, to believe in second chances. You're witnessing the slow, deliberate dance of a world learning to breathe again. And as you settle in tonight, know this. Even if the worst year was 536, the story never ends there. It bends, it twists, and eventually it blooms. The world outside your door pulses with a new rhythm now, one shaped by the fragile steps of recovery and the unpredictable beat of survival. You wake to birdsong again, not just the mournful caws of ravens, but chirps and whistles from a dozen feathered neighbors, bold enough to reclaim the trees and hedges. It's as if nature itself is cautiously testing the air after a long, stifling winter. And what a winter it was. Remember the darkness? That ominous sky that lingered for months, blanketing everything in cold gray. A mystery that still makes historians scratch their heads. Was it a volcanic eruption, a comet's tail, or a bizarre atmospheric anomaly. The debate rages, but you don't really care what caused it. You just know what it felt like. The world was quieter then. Too quiet. No buzzing bees, no rustling leaves, no hopeful laughter. But that silence shattered, replaced by a chorus of survival. Humans rebuilding what they lost, piece by painstaking piece. By this point, you've learned to treasure the small victories. A loaf of bread baked without burning. A well dug deep enough to catch clean water. A child's smile after months of despair. One particularly memorable morning, you help erect a rudimentary bridge over a swollen creek. The wood is old and splintered, the rope's frayed, but it holds. You step carefully across, the planks creaking under your weight. On the other side, a group of villagers cheer quietly, a sound that feels like victory bells. It's a moment that makes you think about the role of infrastructure in recovery. Roads, bridges, walls, they're more than just wood and stone. They're the veins and arteries of society, channels for trade, communication, and trust. And trust, you've learned, is the rarest commodity of all. Because while people crave connection, fear lingers like a stubborn shadow. One trader you meet insists on bartering only with coin, suspicious of old promises. Another refuses to share stories, claiming the past is a trap better left forgotten. You catch yourself wondering if this is how humans are wired, always balancing between hope and suspicion. In fact, some historians argue that the fear born during 530 SXS chaos reshaped social behaviors for generations, fostering tighter kinship groups and cautious alliances that, while protective, sometimes slowed wider cooperation. But there's another side to this coin. Around the same time, you hear about the rise of guilds and communal work groups, early forms of collective organization where skills and resources are pooled. Blacksmiths sharing tools, farmers swapping seeds, carpenters teaching apprentices. These cooperative networks are the threads knitting the social fabric back together. And this rebirth is not confined to your village or even your region. Stories flow in like rivers from far-flung places. The plague-ravaged cities of Europe trying to clean their streets and markets, using primitive sanitation efforts that hint at modern public health. Buddhist monks in India safeguarding ancient texts, turning monasteries into centers of education and charity. The mighty Tang dynasty in China, flourishing culturally and economically despite disruptions, serving as a distant beacon of stability. You find comfort in these stories, proof that the world, despite its scars, is not collapsing into endless chaos. But life after 536 is no fairy tale. You witness the lingering effects of famine. People eating bark, roots, even clay when crops fail. You hear whispers of strange illnesses that don't quite match any known plague. You see how weather patterns still confound farmers. One year scorched earth, the next a deluge that drowns fields. One old woman in your village swears that the stars themselves have shifted, making navigation and planting calendars unreliable. And indeed, ancient records and modern scholars alike note a period called the Late Antique Little Ice Age, a cold snap that stretched decades beyond the initial catastrophe. This climate roller coaster forces innovation out of necessity. You learn to store grain better, to harvest rainwater, and to observe nature's subtle signs. A wilting leaf here, a migrating bird there. Sometimes you feel like an alchemist, mixing old knowledge with new experiments, hoping for a formula that guarantees survival. Meanwhile, the stories people tell begin to change shape. Folktales incorporate the darkness and cold, spinning them into myths about vengeful gods, wandering spirits, or heroic survivors who tame the skies. You chuckle at one particularly colorful legend about a mysterious woman who walked through the darkness carrying a lantern that never dimmed, a tale historians debate as either allegory or eyewitness account. It feels fitting that stories themselves become both a balm and a beacon, helping communities make sense of what happened and giving shape to hope. And through it all, you find your own voice growing stronger. Whether recounting news, teaching children, or sharing a quiet joke, you play your part in weaving the narrative of resilience. Because you realize the truth. History isn't just what happened. It's what people remember and choose to pass on. And in this fragile, patchwork world, every whispered story, every shared song, every rebuilt bridge is a stitch in the tapestry of survival. So you lean into it. You live it. You carry the light, even when the night feels long. You wake to the smell of damp earth and faint smoke curling through the morning air. The horizon glows with the tentative blush of dawn, promising that the light is here to stay, at least for now. In this new era, light and dark have become a kind of currency, a balance you and your neighbors measure each day. And as you walk through the village, you notice how life is both stubbornly familiar and strangely new. Children chase each other with sticks turned swords, their laughter cutting through the crisp air. An old man sharpens his scythe beside the well, grumbling about the weather, but with a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It strikes you that even amid hardship, the human spirit is remarkably playful. This resilience is visible in the buildings, too. Most houses are simple, with frames patched with wattle and daub, roofs of straw or wooden shingles. But here and there, new techniques appear. Some homes have small glass windows made from crude, hand-blown panes. Others show decorative carvings painted with wild flowers, a joyful defiance against the years of gloom. You overhear a conversation about new architecture emerging in distant cities, ideas that combine Roman engineering with local traditions, creating structures meant not just to survive, but to inspire. Historians still argue whether this architectural revival was a true renaissance or merely a practical adaptation. But for you, it's a symbol of hope, a physical testament to humanity's ability to rebuild from ashes. As the day warms, traders arrive with goods you'd thought lost to time. Rare spices, polished pottery, even scraps of silk. You barter for a small, delicate knife with a handle carved from bone. It feels like holding a story in your hand. And stories are everywhere. Travelers from distant lands bring news of evolving empires, shifting alliances, and the slow return of scholarship. You hear about a scholar in Alexandria who has managed to preserve ancient Greek texts, and monks in Ireland translating Latin manuscripts, both acts of quiet rebellion against the erasure of knowledge. You listen, fascinated, as one traveler recounts a debate among scholars about whether this period marks the true Dark Ages or a misnomer, arguing instead for a nuanced understanding of transformation and continuity. You file away this debate in your mind like a rare coin. In the village square, you join a gathering where an elder recounts tales of the great volcanic eruption suspected to have triggered the darkness, weaving in folklore about angry gods and celestial battles. You recognize the familiar blend of fact and myth, the way people turn trauma into narrative to regain control over a chaotic world. At dusk, you wander to the edge of the woods, where the air hums with the quiet pulse of insects and rustling leaves. You recall a curious tale you heard recently, that in some regions, people use crocodile dung as sunscreen, a peculiar practice blending necessity with ancient wisdom. You shake your head with a smile. Nature's weirdness never ceases to amaze. But there's also something more serious here. The way human survival depends not just on physical endurance, but on ingenuity, adaptation, and community. You think about the neighbors who shared food during the worst famines, the strangers who helped rebuild homes, and the healers who worked tirelessly to care for the sick despite their own fears. It's clear now that the story of 536 is not just about the year of darkness, but about the light that follows. The light of compassion, of innovation, of the stubborn, unyielding will to carry on. As night falls, you sit beneath a canopy of stars, brighter than they've been in years, and let the quiet wash over you. Tomorrow, the world will turn again, and so will you. You wake to a sky bruised with the faintest orange light, the dawn creeping slow and shy over the hills. The chill lingers, reminding you that the world is still wrestling with the aftermath of the great darkening. But even the cold seems less biting now, more a memory than a threat. Outside, the village is stirring, a slow and steady rhythm of rebuilding lives in motion. You trudge along the familiar dirt path toward the communal granary, clutching your wooden bucket. On the way, you pass the smithy, where the rhythmic clang of hammer against anvil rings out, a sound almost sacred after so long without it. This clang is a signal of resilience, a heartbeat of civilization coming back to life. For years, the tools and weapons forged here were scarce, ironwork almost a lost art. Now, you hear, blacksmiths across the region are rediscovering old techniques and experimenting with new alloys, an alchemy born from desperation and ingenuity. One smith boasts he's developing a rust-resistant blade by mixing local ores with ash from the volcanic eruptions that plunged the world into darkness. Historians still debate whether these innovations were widespread or isolated sparks. But for your village, they mean everything. The difference between cultivating land or watching it lie fallow, between defending your home or falling prey to raiders. You fill your bucket at the granary, the smell of damp grain mingling with earth and smoke. Food scarcity still shadows your days, but the stores hold more than they did in the darkest years. You recall how the famines forced people to eat whatever they could find, sometimes grass, tree bark, or even clay. These desperate diets, while unimaginably harsh, sparked new farming experiments, from crop rotation to early fertilization techniques using animal manure. You meet Mara, a fellow villager, who shares a basket of foraged herbs with you, a small but precious gift. "We're learning," she says, her voice soft but firm. "The earth is teaching us new ways if we're willing to listen." This notion of learning from hardship echoes beyond your village. In far-flung cities, scholars debate the causes of the climate upheaval. Volcanic eruptions, shifting solar cycles, and even comet fragments. The year without sun, or mystery cloud of 536 becomes a cautionary tale passed down in many tongues. Yet, as you walk toward the river, you notice subtle signs of renewal. The reappearance of migratory birds, buds on stubborn branches, and the slow return of fish in the water. And in the marketplace, you see goods from distant lands. A rare peppercorn from India, coarse linen from Egypt, amber from the Baltic. All proof that long-distance trade, while fractured, hasn't vanished. You wonder how these trading networks survive the chaos, how merchants risk the journey across dangerous roads and seas. Some say that the disruptions forced a shift from large-scale empires to smaller, more agile trading cities and port hubs, each fiercely independent but interconnected in a delicate dance of commerce. You overhear debates among elders about the growing influence of new powers. Tribes once considered peripheral, now carving out territories, some even building fortifications against the uncertainties of the time. This shifting political landscape fuels anxiety and opportunity alike. And then there's the darker side, a shadow still looming over your days and nights. Plague outbreaks persist, haunting communities like grim reminders that the world's wounds are far from healed. You witness neighbors taken suddenly ill, bodies weakened by mysterious fevers that doctors cannot explain. Stories swirl about doctors using herbal remedies, prayers, and rituals, methods as varied as the people themselves. Historians still argue whether these outbreaks were continuations of the Justinian plague or new diseases emerging in the unstable environment. Whatever the truth, fear grips your village, tightening its hold like a cold wind. You catch yourself avoiding crowded spaces, hesitating before accepting food or drink from strangers. It's a new normal, balancing hope with caution. Yet through it all, you sense a powerful undercurrent, a collective determination to endure, to adapt, and to rebuild not just physical structures but trust and community. You think back to the cracked walls of your home, the patched roof, and the patchwork lives of your neighbors. You realize that this world, scarred and fragile, is also vibrant and alive. And you are at its heart. The air is heavy with a familiar dampness as you step outside, the scent of rain-soaked earth mingling with a faint hint of smoke from distant hearths. The world is slowly stirring awake from the long nightmare, but shadows still cling stubbornly to the edges of your vision. You make your way toward the village's gathering place, where a small crowd is assembling for what feels like one of the first public forums in months, maybe years. The topic, the future, the very idea is dizzying. You recall how, during the darkest days of 536, talk of the future was dangerous, too hopeful, too reckless. People focused only on the next meal, the next shelter, the next breath. But now, as the ash settles, the conversation shifts. Leaders and common folk alike debate what kind of society should rise from the ruins. Should old laws be restored, or should new rules guide this fragile rebirth? Should power stay in the hands of aristocrats and priests, or should communities have a say? These questions echo the shifting political landscape across the known world. Empires crumble, new kingdoms rise, and the very concept of authority is in flux. You overhear the village elder quoting a distant ruler who once said, "The future belongs to those who rebuild." But who really are those? The warrior? The farmer? The storyteller? You realize with a wry smile that you yourself are part of this rebuilding, not with sword or plow, but with words and memory. Historians still debate the extent to which this period's upheaval sparked political fragmentation or innovation. But for you, it's about survival and adaptation. At the gathering, a young woman named Syra speaks passionately about the need for education, for preserving knowledge, for teaching children not only to survive but to thrive. Her words stir something deep within you. You think back to the monks in Ireland painstakingly copying manuscripts by candlelight, to the scholars of Alexandria risking their lives to protect scrolls, to the whispered legends that will outlive you all. There's power in stories, in learning, in the slow, deliberate act of rebuilding culture. And then, as the meeting breaks up, a ripple of excitement sweeps through the crowd. News of an unusual discovery nearby. An ancient temple unearthed by recent rains, its walls carved with symbols and tales long forgotten. You join a group heading toward the site, curiosity mingling with a sense of wonder. The temple is a crumbling marvel, its stones moss-covered and worn, but inside, you glimpse frescoes depicting celestial battles, agricultural rites, and faces that seem almost alive in their detail. It's a reminder that human history is layered, built upon stories and struggles stretching back centuries. One of the elders mentions a debate among scholars about whether such temples were purely religious sites or also centers of learning and community. You ponder the temple's silent testimony, the cycles of destruction and renewal, the way knowledge and culture survive even through darkness. That night, as you lie beneath a blanket of stars, the images of the temple's carvings dance behind your eyelids. You feel connected, not just to your village, but to the vast, tangled web of human experience. And you understand that the story of 536 is more than a tale of disaster. It is a story of resilience, of transformation, and above all, of hope. Even when the world feels uncertain, even when the future seems distant, the human spirit endures, carrying light through the darkest of times. Morning arrives soft and slow, a gentle reminder that the earth is still turning, no matter the weight of human troubles. You breathe in the cool air, tinged with the scent of wet grass and wood smoke, and feel an odd sense of steadiness returning. The village feels different today, not just because the sun is out, but because a subtle shift is underway. People are beginning to look beyond mere survival, toward building a future. You wander past the blacksmith's forge where sparks fly in rhythmic bursts, like tiny stars reborn. The smith is talking about a new tool he's crafting, a plow reinforced with iron tips designed to break through the stubborn volcanic ash left by the eruptions of the past decade. This innovation isn't just about farming. It's about reclaiming land that once seemed forever lost. It's about pushing back against the scars of 536. Across the way, you spot a group of children gathered around a traveling storyteller who's just arrived from a neighboring village. His voice is warm and melodic, spinning tales of distant lands, heroes, and strange creatures. It's strange how stories have become more than entertainment. They're a thread connecting fractured communities, a shared culture in a fractured world. You join the circle, entranced by a tale of a phoenix rising from ashes, a metaphor that fits all too well with your current reality. Historians still debate whether such myths were widespread responses to the climate catastrophe or localized traditions adapted to new circumstances. Either way, they resonate deeply now, offering comfort and inspiration. Later, you attend a small meeting in the village hall where elders discuss new agricultural practices being tried out in the fields. Crop rotation, early fertilization, and selective breeding are slowly helping to restore soil fertility, turning the earth from a desolate wasteland back to a place that can sustain life. You learn that these changes are part of a broader movement. Farmers across the region sharing knowledge and seeds, forging a network of resilience and mutual support. This collaborative spirit is a quiet revolution, as important as any battle or treaty. In your wanderings, you come across a curious sight. A small shrine decorated with fresh flowers and crude carvings, dedicated to the dark year spirits, as some call them. Forces believed responsible for the darkness and cold. It's a strange mix of fear and reverence, superstition and spirituality. Some say these spirits need to be appeased, while others view the shrine as a collective way to process trauma. You chuckle softly at the irony. A community grappling with the unknowable through symbols and rituals, much like people have done for millennia. And as dusk settles, you feel a quiet satisfaction. The scars of 536 are still visible, in the ash beneath your feet, in the cautious glances exchanged. But so is a profound determination. The world is fragile, yes, but is also fiercely alive. And you, standing in the midst of it all, are a witness to this slow, beautiful rebirth. The dawn breaks with a soft gray light filtering through a canopy of restless clouds. The air still carries a chill, a reminder that the Earth's recovery is a slow, unpredictable process. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders and step outside, feeling the weight of history pressing gently against your back. Today, the conversation is about knowledge. Not just old wisdom, but new discoveries sparked by the upheavals of the past decades. In the village square, a traveling scholar has arrived, carrying scrolls and books salvaged from faraway libraries. The sight of those fragile pages feels almost magical after years when writing materials were scarce, and literacy was a rare treasure. The scholar speaks of distant lands where people debate the causes of the mysterious dark skies, volcanic ash clouds, solar minima, even comet dust swirling high in the atmosphere. They explain how these phenomena blocked the sun, plunging the world into cold and famine. You listen intently, fascinated by how science and myth intertwine in these stories. Historians still argue whether the solar activity or volcanic eruptions played the dominant role, but the fact remains. The climate crisis of 536 changed everything. You notice children gathered nearby, eagerly mimicking the scholar's hand gestures as they attempt to copy strange symbols. Education, once a luxury, is now becoming a lifeline. You wander toward the riverbank, where fishermen test their nets in the slowly warming waters. Fish populations, devastated by the climate shifts, are now showing tentative signs of return. It's a delicate balance. Too many fish and the ecosystem could collapse. Too few and famine might strike again. The community has learned to watch and listen to nature closely, adapting their practices to new realities. It's a lesson hard won, with many lives lost along the way. Nearby, a healer prepares herbal remedies gathered from the surrounding woods. You marvel at her knowledge, passed down through generations, but now combined with new insights gleaned from travelers and traders. She shares stories of strange plants discovered in distant lands, some rumored to have properties that could ward off illness or soothe pain. The blend of old herbal lore and fresh information is a testament to human curiosity and survival instinct. Later, you join a group discussing recent political shifts. Small kingdoms and tribal confederations are forming, some rising from the ashes of fallen empires. The old world order, with its vast centralized powers, seems to be giving way to a patchwork of smaller, more agile communities. It's a time of uncertainty and opportunity. You hear whispers of alliances forged through marriage and trade, rivalries that flare quickly but rarely erupt into full-scale war. The delicate dance of diplomacy has returned, tentative but hopeful. As the day fades, you find yourself reflecting on the strange mix of continuity and change defining this era. The skies may have darkened, and the earth may have shivered in cold, but humanity's spark endures. Like the slow return of sunlight through volcanic haze, life pushes forward, uncertain but unstoppable. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the generations to come, who will look back on these times as both a warning and a beginning. And you feel a quiet pride in being part of this fragile, resilient thread woven through history. You wake to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds, a gentle soundtrack reminding you that nature continues its slow recovery alongside humanity. The sun peeks cautiously over the horizon, bathing the village in a muted golden light that feels like a promise, fragile but real. Today, your thoughts drift to the arts, the subtle pulse of culture amid chaos. Despite the hardships, or maybe because of them, creativity is stirring again. In a small hut near the village center, a group of artisans have gathered, carving intricate patterns into wood and bone, weaving vibrant textiles, and painting symbols on freshly tanned leather. You watch as a young woman meticulously shapes a mask, its features both fierce and serene, inspired by ancestral spirits and the natural world. This blend of old and new, tradition and innovation, feels like a quiet rebellion against despair. Stories you've heard suggest that during the darkest years, many art forms nearly vanished, their creators lost to famine and plague. Yet fragments survived, hidden in remote monasteries, secret workshops, or passed down orally through generations. Historians still debate whether the cultural dark ages were as bleak as once thought, or if these periods of crisis simply transformed artistic expression into new, less obvious forms. A traveling bard arrives, adding to the day's vibrancy with songs recounting epic journeys, heroic deeds, and the enduring spirit of humanity. His voice carries over the crowd, weaving together myth and memory, laughter and sorrow. You realize that these performances are more than entertainment. They are vessels of collective identity, stitching communities together when everything else seems fragile. Later, you join a conversation about language and communication. The chaos of the time led to the blending and splitting of dialects, some ancient tongues fading while new ones took root. This linguistic flux mirrors the political and cultural upheaval you've witnessed. People barter not just with goods, but with stories and songs, creating shared understandings and new traditions. You reflect on how important these subtle human connections are. The daily conversations, the jokes shared around a fire, the whispered legends passed to children at bedtime. In the evening, as twilight settles, you stand outside your home, listening to the crackle of the hearth fire and the distant hum of the village winding down. The stars, once again visible and sharp, seem to watch silently over a world that has endured far more than you ever imagined. You feel a deep calm, knowing that through art, language, and community, life finds a way to persist, even after the worst. And you, lying awake under that vast sky, are part of the endless story. The chill in the morning air carries a whisper of approaching winter, but this time, it's met with preparation, not fear. You pull your cloak tighter as you walk past storehouses, now partially stocked with salted meats, dried fruits, and grains. There's still hunger, of course, but not the kind that gnawed at bones and dreams a decade ago. Today, you're thinking about travel, not just your own wanderings, but the broader movement of people after the catastrophe. Across your known world, great migrations reshaped borders and cultures. People displaced by famine, conflict, or the collapse of their communities wandered into new territories, bringing ideas, customs, and conflicts with them. You've seen it firsthand, new neighbors with strange accents, different tools, foreign songs. The land you call home now is a patchwork, stitched together by these waves of newcomers. Some of them brought new ways of farming or building. Others carried with them tales of lands where the sun never fully disappeared, or where cities had collapsed into silence. A few, more daring still, claimed to have crossed great seas or treacherous mountain passes, seeking a place untouched by the darkness of 536. Historians still argue whether these migrations were coordinated efforts or desperate flights, but it was a little of both. People move when they must, when staying means dying and the unknown at least offers a chance. Along the way, borders changed. Some kingdoms shrank to little more than fortified towns. Others emerged from chaos like phoenixes, leaner, fiercer, better adapted to the new reality. You visit a local elder, a woman who once led a caravan of survivors from the highlands. Her tales are filled with hardship, crossing frozen rivers, bargaining for food with handmade jewelry, burying friends by moonlight. But her eyes shine as she speaks of how they built a new life here, forging friendships across old tribal lines. Everyone had lost something, she tells you, stirring a pot of root stew. So we learned to share what little we had. That was our currency, grief and grit. You realize these migration stories are more than individual journeys. They're the invisible veins of history, pulsing with adaptation and resilience. Even the roads reflect this change. Old Roman routes, once buried under ash or overgrown with weeds, are being cleared again, not for imperial legions, but for humble traders, pilgrims, and families seeking safer soil. You walk along one such road now, lined with makeshift way stations where merchants swap not just goods but information. The market stalls are modest but diverse. Fabrics from distant valleys, dried herbs labeled in multiple languages, and amulets blending 3 or 4 belief systems. This isn't just commerce. It's cultural cross-pollination. Somewhere in the distance, you hear someone singing in a dialect you don't quite recognize. It lilts and rolls like a songbird flying across borders, carrying bits of every place it's been. Later that night, by the fire, someone tells the story of the City of Echoes, a mythical refuge said to have risen from the ashes, where refugees from every nation live side by side. You chuckle at the fantasy, but part of you wants to believe. Because really, isn't every village now a city of echoes in its own small way? As the stars emerge, you look around at the people beside you, descendants of farmers, soldiers, monks, and wanderers, and think, this is what survival looks like. Not a return to the old ways, but something new. The sun rises a little earlier now, or maybe it just feels that way, as if the sky is trying to make up for years lost under ash and fear. You stir from your straw mat and stretch, your body no longer bracing for catastrophe, but instead anticipating the gentle rhythm of a day that might just be normal. Today, your steps carry you beyond the village perimeter, into the surrounding hills where shepherds guide their flocks through tufts of stubborn grass. It's a picture of quiet persistence. The sheep, once too few and sickly, now bleat in healthy chorus. Their wool will be spun into cloaks, their milk turned into cheese. It's the everyday work that sustains a reborn world. But your purpose today lies higher, in the ruins of an old watchtower perched like a forgotten memory on a jagged ridge. From here, you gaze out over a landscape both familiar and alien. The forests that once stretched unbroken have thinned in places, chopped down for fuel and warmth during the cold years. Yet in others, nature has reclaimed the scars, pushing green tendrils through ash-crusted soil. What you see is not the return of the old world, but the shaping of something entirely new. And from here, you can feel the echoes of what was lost. A village that no longer exists by the riverbend. A monastery whose crumbled stones now serve as walls in your neighbor's goat pen. A language that no one speaks anymore, but whose cadences survive in lullabies hummed by tired mothers. You sit on a flat rock, letting the wind tug gently at your sleeves. And you think, this is not just recovery, it is rebirth. Historians still argue whether the aftermath of 536 accelerated societal transformation, or merely interrupted it. Some say it set civilization back centuries. Others argue it cleared the old growth so new shoots could rise. What you see before you now seems to whisper both truths at once. You begin to descend the ridge path, past saplings sprouting defiantly between rocks, back toward a community that has learned to live with uncertainty. And you pass a group of youths carrying building supplies, wood planks, clay, bundles of thatch. They're erecting a new meeting hall, one with wide eaves and a central hearth. They say it'll be a school, too, one of them tells you, and maybe a place for music when we're not using it for council meetings. Multi-purpose, like everything now, and that's what the future is shaping up to be. Not a mirror of the past, but a mosaic of lessons learned the hard way. People are planting crops, not just for survival, but for flavor. Bees are being encouraged to return with careful planting of wildflowers. A midwife now records births on bark sheets. Crude, yes, but it's a start. Every act, every tool, every ritual is a small step in a long journey towards something enduring. You hear laughter in the distance, children chasing each other around a half-built fence. There's something wonderfully reckless about it, that laughter, as if they believe the worst truly is behind them. And maybe it is. You pass by a field where the older folks gather at dusk, sharing fermented berry drink and tales of back in the dark years. They speak with the gravity of survivors, but also with the ease of people who've chosen not to be defined solely by suffering. One man raises a toast to the year that didn't kill us, and everyone chuckles. Even you. Night falls gently, not with dread but with softness. You lie on your mat, listening to the crackle of a small fire, and feel your breath slow. Tomorrow will be another day, a regular one, and that, in its own quiet way, feels like a miracle. A breeze slips through the shutters just before dawn, cool and fragrant with damp earth and distant blossoms. You stir slowly, savoring the moment before the world starts moving again. Outside, there's the soft murmur of early risers, the thud of a hoe in soil, the clink of a pot filling at the well, the low greeting of neighbors meeting under a softening sky. And for the first time in a long while, there's no dread in your belly. No subtle calculation of rations. No scanning the horizon for wandering warbands. Just the gentle, humming rhythm of life rebuilding itself. You step into the morning light, and everything feels touched by a quiet sort of magic. The village has changed. You've changed. There's a schoolhouse now, still only half finished, but already its walls are covered with charcoal drawings and scratchy letters. Children run in and out with boundless energy, shouting in a mixture of old words and new dialects born from years of cultural blending. Down by the river, boats are being carved again, not just for fishing, but for journeys. Expeditions are being planned, to trade, to explore, to reconnect with distant cousins and lost friends. Curiosity is blossoming again, like a stubborn flower pushing through frost-bitten soil. Historians still argue whether the year 536 was a singular event or part of a longer downward spiral. Was it the worst year, or simply the loudest symptom of a greater unraveling? You think back on the dead, the ash, the cold, and understand why it earned its grim title. But standing here, barefoot in a warming world, you also realize it was not the end. People found ways to laugh, to love, to invent, and to dream, even in the thickest darkness. Maybe that's what makes them truly human. A potter nearby shapes a vase with expert hands, etched with scenes of volcanoes and stars, famine and rebirth. It's not just art, it's memory. You wonder what a future traveler will think when they find that vase buried in layers of earth. Will they see despair or survival? You walk past the village meeting house and hear a debate unfolding, loud but respectful. People are disagreeing about grain storage methods, about seasonal calendars, about who should guard the Eastern Trail. And it strikes you, this is what peace sounds like. Not silence, but the sound of people daring to plan ahead. It would be easy to say everything is back to normal, but that wouldn't be true. Nothing will be exactly as it was before the skies turned gray. But maybe that's the point. Out of disruption came reimagining. Out of loss, reinvention. As twilight descends, you climb one last time to the high ridge overlooking your world. The fields below glow golden in the sunset, patched with green and brown like a great, healing quilt. Smoke curls from chimneys. Lights flicker in windows. Someone is singing a lullaby. And for a moment, you're not just a survivor. You're part of the story, a stitch in the great tapestry of resilience. Proof that even the worst year to be alive, life never gave up. You close your eyes, letting the last breath of sun warm your skin, and you smile. And now the world softens. The stars appear one by one above you, cautious but steady, like old friends returning after a long absence. The wind dies down to a hush, the kind that settles in a tree branches and quiets every fluttering leaf. You lie back on your mat. No need to speak, no need to move. Everything that once seemed unbearable has passed. The ash clouds, the hunger, the silence, all drifted away like mist before the morning. In their place, a stronger rhythm, the pulse of renewal beating softly under your skin. You listen to the faint sounds of night animals in the distance. A bird calls once, then tucks its head under wing. The world is tired, but no longer broken. Your breath slows. Your muscles sink into the mat beneath you. Around you, the land breathes in time with you, slow and steady, like waves on a midnight shore. What a strange, beautiful thing it is to be part of a history so heavy and yet so full of light at the edges. You've walked through it now, felt the chill of that terrible year, heard the whispers of those who survived, watched the flickering sparks of human stubbornness flare into flame. And now you rest. Let the darkness be gentle tonight. Let your dreams carry you somewhere warm. The worst is over. Sleep well, traveler.